Lecture 13 of the Varieties of Religious Experience. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Varieties of Religious Experience by William James. Lecture 13. Saintliness. So much for the phenomena to which the ascetic impulse will in certain persons give rise. In the ecclesiastically consecrated character, three minor branches of self-mortification have been recognized as indispensable pathways to perfection. I refer to the chastity, obedience, and poverty which the monk vows to observe, and upon the heads of obedience and poverty I will make a few remarks. First, of obedience. The secular life of our 20th century opens with this virtue held in no high esteem. The duty of the individual to determine his own conduct and profit, or suffer by the consequences, seems, on the contrary, to be one of our best-rooted contemporary Protestant social ideals. So much so that it is difficult even imaginatively to comprehend how men possessed of an inner life of their own could have ever come to think the subjection of its will to that of other finite creatures recommendable. I confess that to myself it seems something of a mystery. Yet it evidently corresponds to a profound interior need of many persons, and we must do our best to understand it. On the lowest possible plane, one sees how the expediency of obedience in a firm ecclesiastical organization must have led to its being viewed as meritorious. Next, experience shows that there are times in everyone's life when one can be better counseled by others than by oneself. Inability to decide is one of the commonest symptoms of fatigued nerves. Friends who see our troubles more broadly often see them more wisely than we do, so it is frequently an act of excellent virtue to consult and obey a doctor, a partner, or a wife. But leaving these lower prudential regions, we find, in the nature of some of the spiritual excitements which we have been studying, good reasons for idealizing obedience. Obedience may spring from the general religious phenomenon of inner softening and self-surrender and throwing one's self on higher powers. So saving are these attitudes felt to be that in themselves, apart from utility, they become ideally consecrated. And in obeying a man whose fallibility we see through thoroughly, we, nevertheless, may feel much as we do when we resign our will to that of infinite wisdom. Add self-despair and the passion of self-crucifixion to this, and obedience becomes an ascetic sacrifice, agreeable quite irrespective of whatever prudential uses it may have. It is a sacrifice, a mode of mortification, that obedience is primarily conceived by Catholic writers, a sacrifice which man offers to God, and of which he is himself both the priest and the victim. By poverty he immolates his exterior possessions. By chastity he immolates his body. By obedience he completes the sacrifice and gives to God all that he yet holds as his own, his two most precious goods, his intellect and his will. The sacrifice is then complete and unreserved, a genuine holocaust, for the entire victim is now consumed for the honor of God. Accordingly, in Catholic discipline, we obey our superior not as mere man, but as the representative of Christ. Obeying God in him by our intention, obedience is easy. But when the textbook theologians marshal collectively all their reasons for recommending it, the mixture sounds to our ears rather odd. Says a Jesuit authority, quote, "One of the great consolations of the monastic life is the assurance we have that in obeying we can commit no fault. The superior may commit a fault in commanding you to do this thing or that, but you are certain that you commit no fault so long as you obey, because God will only ask you if you have duly performed what orders you received. And if you can furnish a clear account on that respect, you are absolved entirely. Whether the things you did were opportune, or whether there were not something better that might have been done, these are questions not asked of you, but rather of your superior. The moment what you did was done obediently, God wipes it out of your account, and charges it to the superior. So that St. Jerome well exclaimed in celebrating the advantages of obedience, "O sovereign liberty! O holy and blessed security by which one becomes almost impeccable!" St. John Climacus is of the same sentiment when he calls obedience an excuse before God. In fact, when God asks why you have done this or that, and you reply, "It is because I was so ordered by my superiors," God will ask for no other excuse. As a passenger in a good vessel with a good pilot need give himself no farther concern, but may go to sleep in peace because the pilot has charge over all and watches over him, so a religious person who lives under the yoke of obedience goes to heaven as if while sleeping, that is, while leaning entirely on the conduct of his superiors, who are the pilots of his vessel and keep watch for him continually. It is no small thing, of a truth, to be able to cross the stormy sea of life on the shoulders and in the arms of another, yet that it is just the grace which God accords to those who live under the yoke of obedience. Their superior bears all their burdens. A certain grave doctor said that he would rather spend his life in picking up straws by obedience than by his own responsible choice busy himself with the loftiest works of charity, because one is certain of following the will of God in whatever one may do from obedience, but never certain in the same degree of anything which we may do of our own proper movement. Close quote. One should read the letters in which Ignatius Loyola recommends obedience as the backbone of his order if one would gain insight into the full spirit of its cult. They are too long to quote, but Ignatius's belief is so vividly expressed in a couple of sayings reported by companions that, though they have been so often cited, I will ask your permission to copy them once more. An early biographer reports him as saying, quote, "I ought, on entering religion and thereafter, to place myself entirely in the hands of God, and of him who takes his place by his authority. I ought to desire that my superior should oblige me to give up my own judgment and conquer my own mind. I ought to set up no difference between one superior and another, but recognize them all as equal before God whose place they fill. For if I distinguish persons, I weaken the spirit of obedience. In the hands of my superior, I must be a soft wax, a thing from which he is to require whatever pleases him, be it to write or receive letters, to speak or not to speak to such a person, or the like, and I must put all my fervor in executing zealously and exactly what I am ordered. I must consider myself as a corpse which has neither intelligence nor will, be like a mass of matter which without resistance lets itself be placed wherever it may please anyone, like a stick in the hand of an old man who uses it according to his needs and places it where it suits him. So must I be under the hands of the order, to serve it in the way it judges most useful. I must never ask of the superior to be sent to a particular place, to be employed in a particular duty. I must consider nothing as belonging to me personally, and as regards the things I use, be like a statue which lets itself be stripped and never opposes resistance." Close quote. The other saying is reported by Rodriguez in the chapter from which I, a moment ago, made quotations. When speaking of the Pope's authority, Rodriguez writes, quote, "Saint Ignatius said, when general of his company, that if the